Here to break down a very interesting week that was is Scott Bauer from the Associated Press. Let's start by just talking about shared revenue. I want to kind of go maybe in chronological order. We'll start with Wednesday. The governor issues that statement, making it seem like they're inching closer to a deal. Then Speaker Voss tells me they're on first base. Can both kind of be true here?
Yeah, both are true, and it's been a week of things we haven't seen in the Capitol in a while, right? Where the governor, the Republican majority leader, or the Republican Senate leader, majority leader, and the Assembly Speaker, Robin Voss, all met to talk about shared revenue. The Assembly got together Wednesday. Before they come on the floor, the governor says things are looking great. I'm optimistic. Let's keep talking. This is going to be several weeks. And then the Assembly amends the bill and passes it. And much to the surprise it seemed to the governor as to what was in there, and without any agreement from the Senate that they were going to pass the same bill. So Thursday morning, the Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu comes out and says, well, we're not going to pass that bill. We're going to change this key part and maybe some other parts in there and pass our own bill. And the Speaker says, if you do that, you're going to kill the bill. So now we're in this kind of limbo of what happens next, game of chicken, sort of. The governor is saying we're still negotiating, key players saying we're still negotiating. Bottom line is we don't know what's going to happen next. We do know the Senate is going to move ahead with their bill, have a public hearing, probably take a vote in early June, and their bill will be different from what the Assembly passed.
Obviously, the next step is, as you mentioned, kind of reconciling, right? Where the Assembly is sitting and where the Senate, apparently, according to Devin LeMahieu, is sitting. They both seem relatively entrenched, though, on this whole referendum in Milwaukee thing, though, don't they?
Right. So it's the referendum in Milwaukee seems to be the key difference. And the Assembly passed a bill that says voters have to approve any sales tax increase in Milwaukee County or the city of Milwaukee. City leaders and others are fearful that they will never pass. And the issue is so critical with the city facing bankruptcy that they need to have the ability to have the Common Council do that vote and the county board to do that vote rather than a vote of the general public. So that's kind of the crux of the issue right now. And whether both sides can reach some kind of compromise along with the governor remains to be seen. I would say most people remain pretty optimistic this is going to get done. That this is something that really everyone wants. They want to have this shared revenue bill. And it feels like they're very close other than maybe this one big issue.
Yeah, the governor seems to be backing Devin LeMahieu, at least publicly, that get rid of this referendum. And it seems like the governor might be on board with pretty much most everything that's in there then.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten into details on that, but he has been involved in the negotiations. And the Assembly did make some other changes around the edges on things here and there on Wednesday. But, you know, it's going to be a couple weeks before the Senate takes that up, giving lobbyists and everybody else a couple more weeks to come back and say, what about this? What about that? You know, usually in the legislature, when they've got a deal, they want to get it through as quickly as possible. But as we saw this week, they're not quite there on this deal.
How often have we seen the Republican leaders kind of take very public stances on opposite sides of an issue like we saw this week?
I mean, it happens occasionally, but I would say it's very rare. I mean, typically this kind of thing gets worked out before we get to this point. It may work out usually behind the scenes or maybe in committee, but usually by the time a bill comes up on the floor, both houses have agreed what they're going to do. Or you have a situation where one house agrees to something and then it's just not going to come up in the other house. You know, that'll happen pretty frequently. But here we have a bill that both houses want, everyone wants, and yet we've got two different versions now.
Some people unhappy with the way that this amendment was brought up in a caucus and then all of a sudden it is signed and Robin Voss is standing out front saying we're not going to negotiate anymore.
Right, so there's always that talking point of you guys sprung this on us at the last minute. We didn't see it until it came to the floor, you know, hours or minutes before we voted on it, hours in this case before we voted on it. And that is all true. We didn't see that amendment until just before it came out on the floor. However, it was being negotiated by key players behind the scenes. Everyone may not have known everything that was going to go in there, including the governor perhaps, but that is not necessarily unusual. It may not be the way people would like things to go, but that's usually the way things happen.
It's been a very interesting week, and I don't think the shared revenue thing is obviously going to go away. You mentioned it'll be a couple of weeks now before we get the next step, which would be the Senate, which they did say they're just going to talk about the original bill first, right?
Correct. They're going to go back to the version before the Assembly amendment, pretty much pretending like the Assembly didn't do anything. The Senate's going to create, it sounds like, their own amendment and pass their version of the bill So you'll have these two different things out there, and somewhere there'll have to be a compromise.
All right, we shall see what happens, and when something does happen, we'll talk to Scott Bauer again. Thanks
All
so
right.
much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You bet.